My name is Eboné Carrington. I'm the Chief Executive of New York City Health+Hospitals Harlem, and I'd like to talk to you for just a little bit about choosing faith over fear and how to find your most authentic leadership voice through some of the worst and toughest times that you will have encountered. So I want to start off by just sharing one day I found myself at 25 years old standing in the doorway of a colleague, and she asked me why I was dressed like a Chase librarian. I had a very baggy gray suit on, a white button down, my hair was pulled back, and I had on glasses that weren't even prescription because I needed to fit in. I did not bring my authentic self to the workplace that day, and I was challenged for it, and I was struck forevermore with the balance and the ratio of how much of myself to bring into the workplace, how much of myself to bring wherever I was professionally endeavored. And so today I just want to talk about making sure that you don't sell yourself short by trying to be anyone else but your authentic self. And so when COVID came and the pandemic hit us so suddenly at Harlem Hospital, I went right into emergency management mode. I had objectives, and I'll talk with you a little bit about those objectives because you should be clear as a leader about what you're focused on and what you want people to rally around. But before I could figure out how to lead, I needed to figure out what to do. I had a 5-year-old that wasn't in school. I was honestly going through a divorce. I had to figure out how to take 3,000 people who had never seen a pandemic before somewhere that they quite frankly weren't willing to go. And I had to draw on my authentic self. I go and I'm a part of a house of worship that challenged me to be an aggressive disciple, to become what I believe, and to always choose faith over fear. And so one day I had to draw on something deep within before I went to Harlem Hospital, and it was on the strength of my ancestors. I had to say to myself, where do I go to find the strength to lead these people? How do I find the courage and the words to get people to come back to work every day after they've seen death and dying? And it came because I was myself. It came because one day before church, I heard that the word was, you are a warrior. You are strong and you are courageous. And from that moment on, I took my suit off. I put my Timbs on, because I'm from Harlem. I put my Timbs on and I went to work. I am a servant leader. I choose to follow the carpenter in ways that demonstrate my service to people, but I was very metric oriented. Before the pandemic, it was about where my visits were, where my numbers were, how quickly was I able to do operational efficiencies, and then everyone wasn't okay. Psychological safety and maintenance and the provision of our normal society became the most important things, and I couldn't measure that. I couldn't quantify it. All I could do was show up and be present and try on a dime each day to meet people where they were. We made sure that the focus of the pandemic went from PPE and making sure that people could get ICU beds to actually wellness, balance, support, mutual respect. And that was something that really I didn't know I had in me. To pull from your ministry, to pull from the love that you have for people, the love that you in some cases have for Black people, I've never felt that in my leadership before. And after this pandemic, I realized I had to metaphorically shift from being a data-driven CEO to being a servant leader like Jesus, to making sure that people understood that I wanted to value them, that I wanted to hear them, but I also wanted to make sure that I didn't just marginalize them and move past one wave to the next. And then we began to figure out what made people tick at that hospital. And they started working there because they wanted to serve our community. When this vaccination came, and people of color were hesitant or resistant, I didn't want to chalk it up to ignorance. I wouldn't even let them use vaccine ignorance as a term in our hospital because we had been wronged as a community. And so like Harriet Tubman, I said, what can I do to make space? Come what may, how as a leader do I take my risk aversion, which was a big part of my management toolkit, and my calculation and abandon that in service to helping people, to saving one life, to getting one 80-year-old a vaccine in the arm. So much so that we were going to bus them. I never thought I would use the term busing in my professional career. I never thought that I would have such a passion project as helping people usher out of COVID and into a place where not just the COVID vaccine, but where modern science was at the forefront, where we listened in and leaned into the experts to make sure that we as a community were not participating in health disparities. And so from a leadership perspective, being who I am was important in that moment. I needed to pray with some people. I needed to challenge some folks. I needed to roll neck a little bit at board meetings because that's what they needed in order to hear me. And one day, I was with my director of public affairs, and we took an interview with the New York Times. And I thought I would lose my job because I was so angry and I was ill-tempered and I spoke about politics that I shouldn't have discussed. And my pastor's the one that helped me understand that my silence was the part of my leadership toolkit that I did not rest on enough. He said, your work is too important to get fired. So stay quiet and steady the course. And so if there's one thing that I want to talk to you all about, it being authentic in your leadership, is to understand where your true north is and to make sure that you stay calm and you steady the course. A big part of who I am as a leader is to know people, to know their names, to know what drives them. And I got that from my father. He was an oral surgeon and he knew everyone from the housekeeper to the neurosurgeon in the hospital. He had a private practice and a Medicaid practice. So the ratio of faith and fear, the ratio of service and capitalism, they've been a part of my leadership style from the very beginning. And so the recipe of how much of yourself you bring is what I want you to constantly evaluate. I'm not saying go and challenge your corporate culture and get fired. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying make sure that you know that you can push your corporate culture. Make sure that you know you can influence your corporate culture. The species on this earth that is like no other is the Black female. And without fail, we have made inroads. We have created space. We have made for social norms to be very different. And so today I show up and I have a small 5-year-old and he told me that I should start this talk by saying, hi, my name's Eboné. I'm a mom and a businesswoman. And I am. And I would have been ashamed of that in the past. I would have said, I'm a businesswoman. I'm no nonsense. I'm about my work. But I'm his mom. And I'm Gwen's daughter. And I'm Mac's legacy. And more than anything, I have been challenged so many times that I'm not going to show up small or not as myself any longer. One last thing that I'll share is right before I had my son, I was 8 months pregnant, wide load. And I applied for the job that I have today as the chief executive. And the person says, you know you're pregnant, right? Yes, I know I'm very pregnant. However, what he was saying to me is that who you are right now, who I see doesn't look like a CEO, doesn't look like leadership, doesn't demonstrate the ability to stand strong and run an organization because maybe you can't work long hours because you have this child. And so I succumbed to that. I basically had a C-section and came back to work in 6 weeks. I was not bonded with my child because I wanted to get back to show that a leader was present and that a leader didn't let anything get in the way. It's the only regret I have in my professional career. And so I offer these insights to say, how amazing would it have been for me to bring my 40-year-old superpower, which was my infant, to the workplace, to the experiences, to show the resilience of having to stay up all night, have a small child, and run a hospital. I've always ignored those pieces. And so today I stand before you, 41, divorced, happy to be Chase's mom, running a $440 million organization and doing it totally on my terms. And that is because I chose to leverage faith over fear. What I hope to accomplish more in this conversation is to help empower you to not succumb to corporate culture long enough to create corporate culture. You have to understand how to get along early enough so that you can get to a place where you can define corporate culture, so that you can get to a place where you can tell people, take the time that they need for themselves. I came back from delivering my child prematurely because corporate culture dictated that presence, working long hours, and not bringing your family to the workplace was what good looked like in a C-suite. And after the pandemic, I hear the voices of my colleagues' children in their office because I invite them. I want to see people's homes, so I say, take your meetings from Zoom sometimes. I want to ensure that the authenticity that I lacked coming up in the corporate culture, or the acceptance or the understanding that I lacked or that was missing from the corporate culture, is present anywhere that I lead. And I encourage you in your life and in your space and in your spheres of influence to make sure that you lead the way that you want to be led, that you ensure that people know that who they are is who you hired, and it's okay to be fallible, because it's in those periods of weakness, it's in those periods of doubt that some of the most beautiful innovation comes. It was through COVID that I found myself. It was through COVID that I found my solid leadership style, and I finally, today, feel comfortable leading and choosing because faith led me and not fear. So often we're taught to separate church and state. I never felt comfortable even saying God or bless you in the workplace. But in this moment, during the first wave, my church had something called the Presence Project, and it was about prison. However, the Presence Project that we brought to Harlem Hospital was to make sure that no person died by themselves. There was someone at that hospital that sat and either prayed with them or held their hand or sang a song with every person that died, because there were no visitors. In some cases, we were jerry-rigging our phones for FaceTime so that people can see their loved ones right before their last breath. And so I had to draw on that part of my faith, on that part of myself in the workplace, and that was one of the most meaningful things that we did during the pandemic. When you have bodies stacked on top of one another and they just become numbers to you, you've normalized and socialized trauma, and that is not something that we should ignore. So one thing that you have to do as a leader is to ensure that people's tactics, their tasks, but also their mind and their heart space is a big part of your calculus in leading them. The best part of the second wave, and the part that was so empowering around the vaccine effort, was really calling on your homeboys. I'm from Harlem, and I felt scrutinized. So I called a couple people. I called people from Harlem Advocates for Seniors. I called some of my elected officials. I called people at First Corinthian, my church. I called the senior centers to say, do you want to help me? And Harlem showed up. Hazel Duke showed up. The NAACP showed up. Al Sharpton showed up. Neil deGrasse Tyson showed up. And so if I didn't want to lead with who I was, if I didn't want to say, I'm just a girl from Harlem, and I really just want to get other people from Harlem vaccinated, then maybe they would not have come to my aid. There is something that says, be bold, and mighty forces will come to your aid. I felt the physical manifestation of challenging the machine and having all of Harlem and of the people who matter in the community of color come together and say, we got your back. It was in that moment that I realized if I was not myself, they wouldn't have come. And so please, always remember who you are and who you need to be is exactly the functional job description for your task.